Hello, hello, Church House family. We are back for our part two with the assimilation system for churches. If this is your first time with us, I invite you to jump back to the beginning of our podcast dedicated directly toward helping churches reach that next barrier goal, focusing on the logistics, the systems, the processes. We have Pastor Mike Cantrell with us. He's been with us for a few of these, and we are finishing up our part two of the assimilation system. So when we began last week, we were focused on the first five parts of that assimilation system, which were the pre-visit preparation. And then second was the first impressions team. Third was the follow-up process. Four, having clear next step pathways. And five, removing barriers to gaining access to your church community. So if you have not watched that first part one of assimilation, I invite you to go back and do that now because we are going to jump in with part six of the process. So I encourage you, wherever you view our content, wherever you get on, I encourage you to like, share, so we continue to get all this information out to the people who need it. Thank you all for being such devoted followers and listening and rating the content. Would love to hear back from you. Feel free to comment at any point. And without further ado, we are going to jump in with Pastor Mike on assimilation system, and we're on part six.
And then number 6 is ongoing discipleship. Obviously, we want to see them integrated into our discipleship pathway, small groups, opportunities for mentorship, all the things we do in our church that are designed for spiritual growth. We want them to plug into that. So any questions maybe about that before we dive in just a little bit deeper?
Yeah. I think when we think about just the practical nature of systems, I think one of the things that people are going to have to recognize, if they don't already, that it is so far reaching. I think you kind of mentioned it at the beginning, and as you've walked through it, the amount of places your systems touch, everything from your building to your people to the beginning of your assimilation process, before they come, after they've gone, just the overarching space that it covers. And I think one of the things that you may be getting into at a later date is some of that practical stuff. What are the systems you use for systems? Hopefully we'll get a chance to maybe hit some of that. But one of the questions for you while we're here, we're in this space, I think it would be good to begin to identify some of the things that you hit on a little bit of it, but some of those, here's a good list of obvious don'ts, right? Some of them you've already mentioned. You said, man, make sure that your signage is clean. Can I find you? Make sure that your website is in place. If you got a bad website, you got to invest there. Are there any others that you look at and say, here are some of the things that you've seen in the past that are really kind of damaging to that assimilation process? Kind of like a top 5 of don't do this.
Yeah, I think maybe one place to go here with what I call is the first 7 minutes. I think really what we fight against as pastors and leaders in our church is we become so familiar with our environment and with our people that we really don't know what we don't know. It's sort of like, you go into someone's house, and if you're a guest there, you notice things. Every house has a smell. It may be pleasant. It may be not so pleasant. It's interesting when you go into a new space, you notice the things that are broken. You're probably like this right now. Your wife probably talks to you about things that need to be repaired. What's interesting is you say, man, I need to fix that. I need to fix that. And then over time, you just don't get to it. And eventually you don't even notice it. I have this thing. I'll just break away here to tell on myself for a second. I have this thing happening at my house where our smoke alarms and all are hardwired into our electrical system, but I think they have a battery backup. I'm actually not even sure, but I think when those backup batteries die, they start beeping, to let you know, hey, your backup systems. So about 9 months ago, we started hearing these 3 beeps. Beep, beep, beep. Beep, beep, beep. and it drove us crazy. It drove us crazy for about a month or two. Do you know that those beeps are still beeping in my house? And our family members haven't mentioned them in months. And so I think there's things about our church that we have, because of familiarity, have failed to
Good.
notice. So
Come
one
on.
of the best things you can do, obviously, we'll talk about getting feedback from guests and things. There's a whole, science to that. But you do want to invite feedback and get like, what was your experience like? And guests will sometimes tell you, like, hey, this was awesome, but this thing here was confusing. But a lot of it is just assigning some people to be intentional. Remember, assimilation is an intentional process to sort of show up to church this Sunday with new eyes and say, I'm not going to be a staff member this week. I'm just going to be someone new. I'm going to tell myself all the way to church, I've never been here before. And what's that experience like? And a lot of it, like I said, come down to those 7 crucial minutes, those first minutes. And again, you can do it like, when I just ask you, church leader, when is the last time you assessed your parking experience? Whether it is your parking lot, whether it's the crowd, if you have multiple services, not only, you come to church early and there's plenty of parking, and it's not a problem to find a parking place. You know where it is. You know where the front door is. You know all the things. And so you don't even notice. But maybe once church starts to get a little more crowded, things become a little more chaotic. So evaluating, we're talking about, again, your first impression, those first 7 minutes, evaluating the parking experience. And, is there clear signage? Is there smiling parking attendants, ready there to greet the people and direct them? Obviously, they play multiple roles. I mean, in today's world, there's even a safety function there that they play. But that's sort of like flight attendants on a flight, right? Their real job is safety, but they also are friendly, or they're supposed to be friendly, welcoming, help you find your seat, bring you a drink, all of those things. And so we need to think of our parking lot, attendants as sort of the duality of, in some ways they're the first line of defense for safety issues, but also they're the first line of defense. They're the first people that you're going to see. That is, if you have them. And a lot of people, like I said, you're all the way somewhere into the building before you even meet your first smiling face that's intentional to say, hey, we're glad you're here. So parking experience is key. Welcoming environment, again, is key. Are your greeters, are they warm? Are they somebody that is going to be friendly? Are there, like you mentioned, authentic hellos, not just, a machine, somebody that we can get, a robot to greet people, but are they, and are they, is there sort of do they have some like emotional intelligence to like help people to see that single mom with 3 kids hanging off of her and actually say, hey, I'm here to help you. And to again, often all of these encounters happen, Van, before the worship starts. Before God can encounter them in worship, and the pastor can greet them and say, hey, welcome here. I'm the lead pastor here, and I'm glad you're here. All of these are key components to that. And I think sometimes we invest a lot of time in the guts of the service, which we talked about with our worship planning system. But we don't do what takes in the first impressions or these first 7 minutes. I would say a big thing is look at signage and, how to navigate people. Sometimes we don't have the best, we're making do in a church that may not be set up for a church. And so we have to navigate people through hallways, or restrooms aren't clear, or where to check in your children. All of that can be fixed by Sunday by evaluating your signage and navigation and helping people easily find restrooms, check-in areas, and the sanctuary. With that, the kids ministry check-in, that is another piece of the first impression. People are checking their kids usually before church. What is that like? Or your kids ministry, they could be great with kids, terrible with adults. They could not have empathy, compassion. They cannot be friendly and hospitable. So are those people trained? And is your kids ministry check-in process simple? Is it meeting the needs of the parents who are there for the first time that are actually trusting these strangers to take care of their children?
Come
So
on.
all that to be friendly and reassuring, huge part of, the first 7 minutes. And then I'll end with this before you kind of jump in. And I know I'm like a fire hydrant today, but
No, it's awesome. Let's go.
What is your language like? Do you have a guest-centered language, or are you just using insider language? You should equip basically not just the pastor who's sometimes good at it, or the service host or the worship leader, but every team member should be on the lookout for new faces and offer to help them, basically, without being pushy, but just friendly and understanding, having a sense of empathy of like, this is a first-time person and they're nervous to be here. How can I, with a welcoming smile and genuine hospitality, often I say often that the smile and genuine hospitality can speak louder than any sermon. Like, these people are friendly, and it comes down again to that philosophy. We're not an institution that's better than the one down the road. We're a family expecting guests, and we're here to help you on your journey. So hopefully the importance of the 7 minutes are, some things like they can look out for. I do have some quick steps to, evaluate and improve your assimilation system. But what about you just breaking in there? Is there anything,
Yeah. Definitely think we can land the plane with those practical steps. I always love leaving people with practical information. One of the things that was definitely shared with me early on in the process is that your building is preaching a missiological message.
Yes,
it is preaching very loudly. And some of the places where we often don't want to invest money or time because it feels like, hey, people are giving and sacrificing for people to be reached with the gospel. So if I spend a couple $1,000s on getting the building painted and sanded and cleaned up, I'm wasting money. When in truth, man, you're creating that compelling environment. And you mentioned a couple of different pieces in light of that. And I think our ability to create a space of safety is huge. We think about some of the needs that are here in our community, dropping off my children with complete strangers. Yeah, is the process simple, but do I also look at it and go, my child isn't going to get out of this place without them recognizing it? Man, I can get in because I have the right passcode, but getting out feels like Fort Knox. Like, there's this feeling that, man, when my child will still be here when I leave and come back, and really making sure that we're taking those times to really evaluate our churches, our ministries, and how they function. And one of the things that I think all of what you've said is key, but I think one of the biggest ones is if the pastor is the only person who has this mindset, it is doomed to failure. Does your team think this way? Does your team know the assimilation process? Are they familiar enough with it that they can walk you in their own language, their own words from beginning to end? Because if you're the only person that knows it, there's a good chance that it is not happening. And to your point, those sermons that are preached long before we get to the service, those are the ones that are going to decide whether or not someone is going to go, I'm a visitor and I'm never coming back, or I'm a guest and I want to learn more about this family.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, again, I think, what we have to do is, it's simple, but profound. I mean, we have to understand we have all of these things are working at some level, and it's giving us, exactly what they are designed to give us. All we need to do is focus on these things and strengthen. I mean, and we'll take the system that's already running and just have it running it in a way that's helping, the church fulfill its greater mission. And it does come down to, I think, really evaluating and training. And so some steps I just thought to evaluate, I could give you real quick to evaluate and improve your assimilation system. Some I'll probably be repeating, but one is just assess the guest experience. Again, visit the church as if you were a first-time guest, and then ask yourself, sort of do that autopsy. What's confusing? What's missing? Or what things about my environment are uninviting? And fix those things. And church leader, most things can be fixed before next Sunday. Some things
Come on.
you'll have to design, you'll have to order, you'll have to do some of those things, but most of these things can be fixed. Even if it's you saying, I'm going to greet people on Sunday and I'm going to fix that, survey recent guests. I mean, as part of your follow-up, one thing we do here is we actually call guests still old school. And, one of the questions here, we kind of try to mine out some information, ask for feedback, what stood out to them, what was positive, what are some things that we could correct, like, man, it was great. I just couldn't, whatever. I couldn't find the kids ministry. I had to search around the building or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
Obviously reviewing your follow-up. Once, we haven't talked about it. A key piece of this is the connection card and having some moment to get people's contact information. We don't really have time to dive into that today, but once they've trusted you with coming to your church and then giving you their information, what's your follow-up process look like? Is it timely? Does it offer clear next steps? All the things there. You can analyze your volunteer or what we call, ministry team engagement. Are your greeters, ushers team, are they trained to create a welcoming environment? And that can be challenging, but man, we mentioned Chick-fil-A. They've got 16-year-olds with some of the best hospitality skills, way better than most churches.
Mm-hmm.
So I can train a 16-year-old to be welcoming and friendly and say, make their famous statement. I'm trying to think what it is. What's that famous?
My pleasure.
Statement?
My pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, I can't get my 16-year-old to anything is his pleasure. And so my pleasure, of course, I'll refill your drink. I mean, if you can train a 16-year-old to do it, we can train our teams to do it. And
so good.
We need to analyze our volunteer engagement, identify gaps, and provide training where needed. Again, you might not be able to do that by next Sunday, but you can get it on the schedule before next Sunday to do some hospitality training. Simplify your next step. Sometimes we want to give people so many options, they get confused and don't know what to do. Think about what thing are we communicating, that we want people to do. And then once they sort of the funnel concept, once they enter that, then there'll be, the bevy of options of things that they can do to get connected and engage. And then, obviously I've said that already, make it a habit as a church to review your assimilation system. I mean, somebody should probably be in charge of the assimilation system or have the stewardship over it. And almost on a quarterly basis, like you change your oil in the car, you're reviewing your assimilation system. Buy insights from your staff. Talk about it in your staff meetings. And then also with your volunteers and guests and all that, as you invite feedback into that, you're working on it, making it better. I think almost every church should have a value, sort of a distinctive, a culture value is we want to make things better. And just building that culture of improvement, I think is awesome. Again, a couple things I would say just to wrap this up. First steps for improvement: host a volunteer training focused on hospitality and guest experience. Obviously, it might be a job to get some intel, but when's the last time you've done a hospitality training for everybody in the game of hospitality? Update your website, get some outside, look at your website and think, is it inviting? Am I answering the right questions? One of the things that's just driving me crazy, I know you're a worship guy, but the churches on social media, this trend of posting your set list, I'm just thinking, what about that is welcoming? I mean, who's that for? Who cares?
Who's that for? Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I know it's a trend, and I know I might be being old school here, but it's a lot of times we're giving people information they're not asking for. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing on the website. Like, my website is not designed for my church members. They know about us, right? My website is my first impression of first impressions. And am
Yeah.
I messaging? Am I, is my language guest friendly and helpful, clear? And when people look at my website, they say, man, I want to check this place out. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy, but it starts there, and then look at your follow-up system. Is it clear? Is it concise? Does it have multiple touch points? Maybe, are we thinking about first time guests, second time guests? And then think about planning something. One of the things that I did is a lot of times people use like a membership class van as like the first thing to invite people to. And that's great because we always say, coming to the class doesn't make you a member. It lets you see, sort of take the cover off, lift the hood, see what we're about, hear our history, find out, is this a place that you want to belong, which is
Yep.
all good. But oftentimes that's sort of we're asking people to take a big step.
Come on.
And so like some sort of intermediate step, plan a newcomers event, to connect recent guests with staff members and leaders. It can be after the service. It could be, like I said, just a meet and greet, a come and go. Hey, some of our pastors and staff are going to be in this room with some refreshments. Pop in
Yep.
and get to know us. Sometimes that sort of intermediate step will help people connect more than a big step. If I'm asking you to go from my office door over here to my desk, you can't do that in one step. So you need some intermediate steps. So think about, it's just something you can do is, do we have a simple next step for newcomers, first time guests, second time guests, that's going to help them plug in? Or are we asking them to take too big of a leap?
Yeah.
I'll just conclude with this, wrap it up on this note, Van, is I think the biggest thing with any of these systems, but especially with the assimilation system, is small changes can have a big impact.
So good.
Small changes can have a big impact. And so don't think, man, I've got to overhaul everything by next Sunday. But what are the systematic small changes we can do to improve our assimilation system, which again is just that intentional process that involves hospitality and discipleship that helps first-time guests become fully engaged members. Hopefully that helps. Let me just turn it back to you for any questions.
Yeah, I think across the board, the assimilation system is so much richer and deeper than I think we could truly wrap our minds around. And as you talked about, Pastor Mike, just that idea of being able to start training your mind and your eyes to see these things, the return on investment is so exponential. I even think about how it informs how we process everything that happens in the church. And I think one of the things that we've hinted at, but really haven't outright said, you said it a few times, that I just want people to hear, even as we're finishing now. What is the purpose and the design and the goal of your church? What is your mission? If you're busy trying to beat the church down the street or trying to grow larger than this other church that you're in competition with, like that is not a real foundation to build ministry on. So what are you uniquely called as a church to provide for the community? How are you called to engage them? And building an assimilation process around that becomes vital. For us, as a part of the Every Nation family, discipleship is the thing for us. We want people to not only have a relationship with Christ, we want them to be able to share that relationship with others and help them come to have a relationship with Christ. And many churches will say that is what they want, but then we look at your assimilation process and it has nothing to do with making disciples. So are the next steps clear? Is the next part of that process clear? Are we, in some places, assuming a certain amount of, if you join our family, if you're joining and becoming a member here, we actually live in the assumption that you want to share the gospel with your family, with your coworkers, man, with the person you meet in the grocery store. And if that's the case, our process will be to train you, to shape you, to grow you, to build your confidence to do that. Sometimes the best assimilation, best next steps, which is what we do a next steps meet the pastor. So it literally kind of encompasses both of those things. Everybody wants to meet the pastor. Everybody wants that opportunity for the face-to-face. So we said, in order for you to have that, you're not going to be able to do it at the back of the worship center or in the lobby. He's going to be over here in this classroom. So if you really want to meet him, you're going to have to make the trip over. We're going to have some food set up for you. He's going to share the story of our church. And on the back end, you can decide, hey, I want to continue this process. So informing yourself and your team about what that looks like can inform so many pieces, even for the sake of online streaming for your services. That's another big box that we're not going to open today, but it can inform your philosophy. For us, we believe you fall into two camps. You're either a church that has an online evangelistic ministry, or you are a church that says our online presence is a vehicle which will draw people into our in-person community. Deciding which one of those you are will decide on how much you invest in your online environment, how much you invest in staff to manage that online environment, how much you're willing to form your budgets, your structure around that. For us, we are a church, unapologetically, we want you here. We want you in person. So our online environment, our live streaming environment is mainly for people that are checking us out, who want to come in person, or are people who are traveling and want to be able to stay in touch with what's going on that Sunday. We don't look at it and go, we are an overarching evangelistic ministry that is trying to win souls to the kingdom through our online platform. And that does a couple of things for you. It removes the stress and the weight of, I got to meet this mega church platform and how they live stream. Or, man, we don't put any money into it and it's really bad and no one watches. No, there's an in between. And I think your assimilation process should be informed by that. And it becomes this back and forth. The more clear we are with our vision, the easier it is to figure out that assimilation process. The more clean we become with our assimilation process, the more clear our vision to everyone who's coming becomes.
Yep.
So,
yeah. And
love it.
one thing I love about these the systems is they all do connect. They're all so like what you're kind of you talked about there for a minute is like this assimilation process will connect to your discipleship process, which connects to your leadership process. It's all part of it, but it's again a way to break it down. And I just end with this little thought: a strong assimilation system is more than just about processes. It's about helping people. I know I've said this 1,000 times, but encounter the love of Christ and find a spiritual home. And so by, I think, us creating this intentional journey for our guests, you'll not only help them feel welcome, but you'll also empower them to take meaningful next steps in their faith. And that's what it's all about. So hopefully this has helped today, man. I love talking about, again, post my email there. They can email me if they have further questions. If you'd like to bring me back, talk about this further, dive into some of these things. You know me. I love the church. Van, I love what you're doing through Church Ops 500, and I'm just here to serve you guys any way we can.
Come on. I love it. Thank you for the time. Thank you all for listening. We are going to keep diving into these systems. I am a rabid dog when it comes to it. I'm texting Pastor Mike, when can we get the next session in? When can we get the next recording? So for all of you that are hungry for that next system update, I am just as hungry. I'm going to keep getting on his schedule, man, and we're going to keep cranking out these systems. As you've got questions, please send them to us. We're more than willing to answer. I'll pass them on to Pastor Mike. I'll make sure that in the closing for each one of these, you'll have that information so that you can reach out to him. So thank you all again. Please rate, please like, please share. We fully believe that this information can impact our church environment for the good in so many levels. And we can start seeing churches that often don't have the resources they feel they need can begin to grow in momentum, grab traction in their communities, better understand what draws people to your church and what will allow them to engage in real relationships. So thank you for listening. Always remember, your amount of resources do not speak for you, but how you use them says everything. Every day, with the right tools, the right systems, the right relationships, it is possible for you to do the impossible with less. Thank you guys for hanging out, and we will definitely see you in the next session.